I'm a meditation coach and trainer. I Being a meditation teacher is nothing that I ever dreamt about or expected for my life. I grew up in a very poor immigrant Korean family, and we lived below welfare. We were at the poverty line. So for me, making an income was really important. And I decided to set my goals on business and being successful in the business world. So I went right to Wall Street. And that's where I started my career. I became vice president of a boutique company where I worked with hedge funds, and I was helping hedge funds manage their portfolio with different stock ideas. So this was my background. And at the age of 29, I hit rock bottom. But at the same time, I was at the height of my career. So I had achieved a level of success, of wealth, of um, all these things that were external in terms of status. And inwardly, I felt god awful. It was like I was so depressed. I was very lonely. I couldn't relate to living in this kind of environment and world, this five-star world of finance and living this fast-paced life. I was so confused because here I had achieved what I set out to achieve, what the world told me was good to have. And inside, I felt, um, you know, nearly suicidal. And that's when I discovered meditation. And meditation really did save my life. I felt um, coming to the cushion for me was very cathartic. And for the first 3 months of teaching myself how to meditate from a book, counting my breaths from 10 to 1, I cried the entire time, like I was just sobbing, endless tears. And I uh, felt all the emotions, all the stuff that I had carried with me, the feeling of responsibility for caring for my family, all these things that meditation helped me to discover. And in fact, it transformed every aspect of my life that I left my successful career in New York, after having been promoted to partner of my company and having worked really hard. I ended up leaving to study meditation in India. And I really wanted to just deepen my own practice. It was something that was so life changing that I went to Asia and I traveled for about a year and a half studying and deepening my own personal practice. So that was my initial intention. And what ended up happening is I stayed at a lot of spiritual communities. I lived in an ashram in India, and it was there where I learned more about the origins of meditation, but I also began adopting ways of being, new ways of being that I felt were better for me. But in the end, I realized were also limiting me, especially as a woman of color, going to many of these places where they're teaching traditional meditation. And something that I discovered as I was going through my experience is, um, how much of my own power and my own voice I relinquished for the sake of learning meditation. And it started, at first, it's really subtle when you go into these communities. You don't realize that you're buying into a whole new way of living, of practicing, of being with other people. So I started entering these environments where, we were silent. We did every single thing we were told without question. We all wore the same outfits, or we were told not to wear anything that was flashy or would draw attention to you. In some places, no makeup. There were rigid rules that we followed. And I understood meditation to be something that was disciplinary, something you had to work hard at. And so it was up at the crack of dawn, lights out at 10 p.m. So and every hour of your day being dictated by the ashram or the spiritual community that you're in. This is just an example. Not all the places were like this, but an example of, how you right from the get-go begin to relinquish your own sense of what's good for you, your own voice. And so I started adopting these beliefs that, I had to constantly restrain myself. And most especially being in India, having to cover myself all the time as a woman, you had to really be careful for your safety, traveling alone, and you had to cover your body, cover your arms when you entered any spiritual place or temple. And so I learned to constantly cover myself and to um, associate being spiritual to just being right up here, head and shoulders meditation practice. I didn't have a sexual drive. I didn't have anything below the waist to have to deal with. I had to desexualize myself. I had to cut my own voice out, my own perspective, my opinions, because they were egoic. It was all about the ego. And I had to give my power away to a guru or someone who is at the head of this organization from the beginning, and trust the process. And what was so interesting to me is how many people came to these places that were deeply wounded, people who were deeply wounded, who weren't able to function in society. And they often came to these places as refuge, or to, find a way to live for themselves. And how much you can adopt through the ethers and through the subconscious and the unconscious when you are practicing very rigorous energetic techniques and practices, right? So I started to tell myself it was bad to be sexual, to have sexual desires. I have to cover myself now. I can't voice my opinion because that's ego. And now I have to stay silent. I have to put myself last and always be of service and sacrifice my needs for the whole. So you're kind of learning these things, and money is bad. That's another thing. You can't ask for money or receive money when you're in spiritual service. You should never seek money. And so there's all these ideas that I began to adopt that, quite frankly, when I left the spiritual communities and went to re-enter into my life back home in the States, I found myself um, unable to really be at the level. I was at a very high level of being able to achieve, succeed, do things. And all of a sudden now I was confused. I wasn't able to, get things together in quite the, way that I used to be able to make things happen. And also I noticed that my voice, it was like I did not know how to express myself after I left the traditional meditation practices. And I'm saying these practices were all founded and shared by men. They're androcentric, right? So a lot of it's coming from a male point of view. And there's nothing, I'm not saying one is good or bad, just that it's very imbalanced. I went to India and I stopped having a period. I stopped having my normal reproductive health as a woman because I was rigorously studying the traditions of yogic meditation, and it threw my whole body and system out of balance. So um, I felt that, coming back from all that, I was like, wow, I used to be able to do things and make things happen. And now I was almost, what I felt was dysfunctional, because I was spending so much time in these areas and communities that promoted and emphasized these other values. And ultimately, values I felt that held me back and didn't allow me to be of the highest service that I could be. And so I want to talk with you today a little bit and discuss some of these ideas and the values that we pick up and what we think is spiritual or not spiritual.